Welcome back to Healing Out Loud. I'm Donna Blanchard, an author, coach, Reiki master, and your host. If you're joining me for the first time, thank you for being here. And if you've been listening since the beginning, thank you for continuing this journey with me. Healing Out Loud is a space where we can have honest conversations about the challenges many of us face but don't always want to talk about. My hope is that these conversations help you feel seen, understood, and a little less alone. Today's topic is one that hits too close to home for me because walking on eggshells is something I still struggle with at times. It's hard for me to admit that. Parts of me wishes I could tell that I've completely overcome it. But the truth is, I haven't. I've done a lot of healing over the years and I've come a long way, but there are still moments when I catch myself carefully choosing my words, worrying about how someone might react, or feeling responsible for keeping the peace. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it today, because healing isn't about being perfect, it's about becoming aware. And sometimes it's about recognizing patterns that still show up and meeting ourselves with compassion instead of judgment. So if you find yourself walking on eggshells too, you're not alone. So let's talk about it. Have you ever felt like you have to carefully choose your words? You rehearse conversation in your head. You avoid certain topics. You stay quiet because speaking up feels too risky. And you find yourself constantly monitoring someone else's mood, trying not to upset them. If that sounds familiar, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about what really means to be walking on eggshells and how it affects our relationships, our confidence, and our sense of self. Now, what does walking on eggshells really mean? Walking on eggshells is living in a state of emotional caution. It's when you become so focused on avoiding conflict, criticism, anger, or rejection that you stop showing up as your authentic self. Many people develop this pattern around emotionally predictable people, but it can also be something we carry into adulthood from childhood experiences. Over time, over time, it's often because of the form of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for danger, tension, or disapproval. Now, here's my experience. For me, this pattern started years ago. After my parents divorced when I was 14, my world changed dramatically. I learned very quickly how to read a room. I became aware of other people's moods, reactions, emotions, and I learned to keep the peace. I learned to be careful of what I said and how I said it. I also know for me, being an empath plays a huge role in on taking on other people's energy, feeling their emotions, and mine intensify when I'm around certain people who have this energy that affects mine. Like many people who grew up in emotionally difficult situations, I became focused on making sure everyone else was okay. One of the root causes of walking on eggshell for me was actually my dad's explosive reactions. As a child, even throughout my adulthood, I learned that certain situations could trigger a strong reaction from him. If he felt confronted, challenged, criticized, or frustrated, his response would be intense. And I can honestly say there were times when I was afraid of his reaction. Because of that, I learned to read the room. I learned to anticipate moods. I learned to be careful about what I said and when I said it. But here's the interesting part. I wasn't always quiet. Sometimes I fought back. Sometimes I said exactly what was on my mind. I stood up for myself and spoke my truth. But often that came with consequences. One of the consequences was silent treatment. And at one point, my father didn't speak to me for 8 years. 8 years. That's a long time to carry the message that speaking your truth can cost you a relationship. Looking back, I can see how experiences like that shaped me. They taught me that conflict could lead to rejection. The disagreement could lead to disconnection, and that having a voice would come at a price. And even though I know differently today, those old feels still show up from time to time. I can see how my father's behavior affected all of us as siblings. We didn't learn healthy conflict resolution skills. We didn't learn how to sit down or have difficult conversation or work through disagreements together. What we learned was very different. We learned to explode. We learned to shut down, walk away, because that's what we saw and that's what we knew. And as a result, there were periods of time when some of my siblings and I didn't speak to one another. Those years were incredibly painful to me, not because the hurt disappeared, but because the distance remained. When communication breaks down, relationships often suffer, and sometimes what begins as disagreement turns into years of silence. And one of my fears today is seeing those same patterns repeat themselves in the next generation. When my children experience conflict for one another, I sometimes worry they will do what we did. They'll walk away instead of working through it. The hurt feelings will turn into distance, and distance will turn into years. I do know it's their journey of their own, and I know I can't control the choices they make. But having lived through the pain of fractured family relationships, it's a fear that still surfaces from time to time. The difference today is that I recognize the pattern. I understand where it came from, and I also know that awareness gives us an opportunity to choose something different. Healing doesn't change the past, but it can change what we pass forward. For a long time, I felt responsible for other people's feelings. If someone was upset, I wanted to fix it. If there was conflict, I wanted to smooth it over. If relationships felt strained, I often looked for what could I do differently. What I didn't realize was that somehow along the way, I had started abandoning myself. Even as an adult, I find myself walking on eggshells. With certain family members, I would think carefully before speaking, replay conversations in my head, and worry about how my words might be interpreted. I also noticed this pattern showing up with people in positions of authority, bosses, supervisors, or anyone I perceived as having the power over me. Even when there is no real reason to be afraid, I would find myself second guessing what I wanted to say. I'd worry about disappointing them, being criticized, or somehow getting it all wrong. Looking back, I can see those reactions weren't really about them. They were connected to old wounds and fears that had never been fully healed. Another area where walking on eggshells is showing up in my life is around my personal space. For many years, I didn't understand why I'd become anxious when people stayed with me for extended periods of time. I would feel overwhelmed. I would find it difficult to relax. Sometimes I feel consumed with anxiety and almost feel like I couldn't breathe. The strange thing was that I often loved the people who were in my space. It wasn't about not caring for them. It was about feeling like I couldn't fully be myself. I found myself constantly aware of other people's presence, their needs, their routines, and their expectations. Instead of relaxing into my own home, I felt like I was managing the environment. For a long time, I thought something was wrong with me, but over the years, I began to understand something important. I need space and I need quiet. I need time to recharge and reconnect with myself. I've learned that people can absolutely be in my space, but for a limited period of time. People today laugh when I say, oh, they're not staying with me for more than 2 days or 4 days. How can you stand having people live with you for a week or two? So it's an ongoing joke with people who know me when they're having their company and they say to me, oh, we know Donna wouldn't allow this. But what changed wasn't the people around me. What has changed was my willingness to recognize my own needs and honor them. In the past, I'd sacrificed my comfort, my peace, my need for space because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I thought setting a boundary meant I was being selfish. Now I understand that setting a boundary isn't rejecting someone, it's respecting myself. Now, here are some signs that you may be walking on eggshells. You overthink text messages before you send them. You avoid difficult conversations. You apologize even when you've done nothing wrong. You feel responsible for everyone else's feelings. You keep your opinion to yourself. You feel anxious before seeing or speaking to certain people. You constantly try to fix situations or keep everyone happy, but here's the hidden cost. The problem is that walking on eggshells doesn't create space, it creates exhaustion. Over time, you can lose touch with your own needs, opinions, your own voice, and your own identity. You begin shrinking yourself to make others feel comfortable, and eventually you wonder, where did I go? The truth is, when we've spent years trying to avoid conflict or keep everyone happy, it can become second nature. You don't even realize you're doing it anymore. But here's what healing looks like. Healing doesn't mean becoming confrontational, it means becoming authentic. It, mean, it means learning that other people's emotions are not your responsibility, speaking your truth kindly, set boundaries without guilt, allowing others to manage their reactions, and remembering that disagreements is not rejection. One of the hardest lessons I've learned is that I can love someone deeply without sacrificing myself. Protecting yourself isn't the same as abandoning someone else. Setting a boundary is not rejection. Choosing not to engage in every conflict is not being uncaring. Stepping back from someone else's emotional storm does not mean you don't love them. It simply means you're learning to care for yourself too. For many years, I believed that being a good person meant always being available, always helping, fixing, and always carrying more than my share. Now I understand that healthy relationships allow room for both people to be responsible for their own emotions. And that's not selfish, that's healthy. Questions for reflection. Grab a pen and paper and write down these questions. And after you've completed all the questions, take some time to reflect and answer truthfully and honestly. Number 1. Who do I feel I need to walk on eggshells around? Number 2. What am I afraid will happen if I speak honestly? Number 3. How often do I put someone else's comfort ahead of my own well-being? Number 4. What would change if I trusted myself more? And number 5. Where in my life am I ready to stop shrinking? Coming up in the next episode, have you ever found yourself reacting to a situation and wondering, why did I respond that way? Or maybe you've noticed yourself repeating the same patterns, having the same fears, or facing the same struggles, even though you've worked hard to move forward. In our next episode, we're talking about something many of us don't realize: when the past is still running the show. We'll explore how childhood experiences, family dynamics, old wounds, and learned survival strategies can continue to influence our relationships, decisions, reactions, and beliefs long after the original events have passed. The goal isn't to blame the past, the goal is to understand it. Because when we understand where our patterns come from, we can begin choosing differently. And I hope you'll join me. Now, if you've ever been walking on eggshells, I want you to know this. You're allowed to take up space, you're allowed to have opinions, you're allowed to set boundaries, you're allowed to need alone time, and you're allowed to protect your peace. And you're allowed to stop carrying responsibilities that were never yours to carry. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Healing Out Loud. If you're looking for additional support, I offer one-on-one coaching for women who are navigating emotional healing, life transitions, and personal growth. Details are found on the show description with a link. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love you to follow the podcast, leave a review, or share with someone who might need to hear this message. Until next time, remember, you don't have to figure it all out. You just have to take the right next step for you.